welcome to a birthday edition of Yelling on WorldwideLeaderSports.com and Clicks TV. I'm your host, Matt Ryan, and folks, the road to nowhere took a break last week. We needed to kind of get the roadmap out there, and also it was 4th of July weekend. We were more concerned with burgers and hot dogs than tearing down capitalism. But this week on the show, Dr. Marvin Williams returns with The Notes. We'll come back in a week or two with another edition of our favorite thing, Hot Takes, the game show hosted by Stephanie Sotilli. And we will hear from Dr. Download this week on whether or not you may be the person who should actually be watching this show. And we'll start things off with a new segment on the show, things on the world of sports that are pissing Matt off, because it's on the world, it's not in the world, it's on top of the world of sports. So things on top of the world of sports that are pissing Matt off. First off, it's All-Star Week in the world of MLB, and Shohei Ohtani had a coming-out party, being the first Japanese-born pitcher to pitch in the All-Star Game since Hideo Nomo, and also the first pitcher in over a century to play both a pitching and hitting position in the All-Star Game, being the designated hitter for the American League team on this past Monday's All-Star Game. And on top of that, you know what? Let's talk about Stephen A. Smith. Let's just talk about it. Bloviating gasbag Stephen A. Smith this weekend not only embarrassed himself by working the UFC, a sport he knows very little about, and as someone who works as a bloviating gasbag in the world of mixed martial arts, you do have to have some prescient knowledge of the sport to understand it. Him and Max Kellerman were trotted out by ESPN, and Addison Rae, who is famous for doing dances on TikTok, had a job as a UFC commentator and interviewer for about 30 seconds before the UFC were shamed into firing her the day of the pay-per-view. So, fun times had by all at UFC 264, especially Conor McGregor, who needs to drink some more milk because his leg got Anderson Silva'd in the first round of his fight against Dustin Poirier. We'll have more about that on another segment down the road here on Yelling. But let's go back to Stephen A. Smith. Shohei Ohtani is a revelation in the world of baseball. And he doesn't need to learn or know English for us to realize and celebrate that fact. The man is hitting home runs at a record rate and having a top pitching year outside of, Jacob deGrom, because Jacob deGrom, praise be to deGrom, is the best pitcher in baseball. But Shohei Ohtani doing what he's doing at the level of excellence that he's doing, anyone talking about that need-to-know English stuff can really piss off. First and foremost, Fernando Valenzuela. If you're too young, and I'm too young to know this, but if you can remember back in the 1980s in Los Angeles, the same city that Ohtani is allegedly pitching in, even though they're in Anaheim, Fernando Valenzuela was a revelation on the Los Angeles Dodgers as a starting pitcher. Did not speak or did not have a real grasp of the English language during his playing days and utilized a translator. Or El Duque, here in New York City for the New York Yankees and later the New York Mets, the guy was a phenomenon, and the fact that Brian Cashman revoked him having a translator later into his career is not only myopic, tenuous grasp on the English language here, and I was born in the goddamn country. But Stephen A. Smith saying that Ohtani can't be a real star in the United States without knowing English or having a real understanding of the English language. Ichiro Suzuki. Like, you take a look at all of these different players across sports, primarily in baseball, who have translators. You take a look at Amanda Nunes, one of the biggest stars in mixed martial arts, who still utilizes a translator even though she works, trains, and lives in South Florida. It's insane to me. It's disrespectful to not only Ohtani, but to the baseball audience to assume that this player, this once-in-a-generation icon, can't reach that we can't reach out and understand and appreciate that. I stop what I'm doing to make sure I watch Ohtani highlights on social media, on Twitter. I stop what I'm doing. And I rarely do that for sports anymore, especially baseball. The sport of baseball has passed me by and passed many people in my generation by because we don't have stars like that. And for Stephen A. Smith, someone who understands that level of scrutiny, that level of lens. The man covered Allen Iverson. The man covered the New York Knicks. He's covered superstars that are at a level that Ohtani's trying to attain. And for him to say that, and let's not forget about the shit he said about the Nigerian basketball team, and we look at that and we look past it because it's Stephen A. Smith. He's a bloviating gas bag. But then you look at the macro of all of this, and you see the fact that this embrace debate ideology, this Skip Bayless, Stephen A. Smith, Shannon Sharp kind of bloviating has been aped and co-opted by the news in this country. If you flip between the channels, the only thing that separates a show like Hannity or Tucker Carlson or anything on CNN, Anderson Cooper, is not only the content, but the chyron. If you're just flipping through, you're just seeing a bunch of people, like I'm doing now, talking to you very loudly, very passionately, very ineptly for the most part, about things they're supposed to understand, and they're giving you opinion. And that's what it is. It's the hot take. It's the thing to get people arguing. It's the thing to turn people into fans or turn them into detractors. We need to look at what Stephen A. Smith and Skip Bayless do with the same level of critique and analysis as the news media, but we also need to take that a step further, because we need to look at it as theater, as performance art, as a television show. The same level of scrutiny that wrestling fans and people in the wrestling community give pro wrestling, we need to give to the people on First Take and the people on Fox, CNN, MSNBC, unless they're actual newscasters, unless they're on SportsCenter or actually reading the news with no opinion. We should not give, or we should not delineate Greg Gutfeld and Stephen A. Smith. They trade in the same parlance. They just go about it differently. And it's very thinly veiled. Stephen A. Smith made a business after going after Kevin Durant, deriding LeBron James. Greg Gutfeld does the same thing with Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Bernie Sanders. They're playing with a different set of cards, but it's the same goddamn game at the end of it. And that's infuriating to me. And that's infuriating to a lot of people in this country. And I'm at the point where it's why I'm doing this show. Because somebody has to say it, and there's a lot of people saying it, but I feel the need to say it. I feel the need to have a platform with my silly little goddamn puppet show and say this is dumb. And the fact that these things exist, and Stephen A. Smith, who is still getting paid $5 million a year, we have to use the term Stephen A. money in stories about people like Maria Taylor, who have been held back and held in such disdain over the past few weeks because of her contract and because of the opportunities she has been given or denied in this country. And Stephen A. Smith gets to skate on by. He's still hosting finals coverage. He's being flown on a private goddamn jet to cover all of these things. And I would never say that I'm more of an NBA expert than Stephen A. Smith. I would say I'm more of an MMA expert than Stephen A. Smith, but that's not really a high mountain to climb. But I've been sufficiently pissed off at this point, so the things that I'm pissed about were right there. And then it translates into the USA basketball team. First and foremost, Tokyo is on lockdown. There will be no fans at the 2021 Olympics. So the city of Tokyo is taking the L of all L's on this Olympic Games. They're not going to be able to make back any of the money they're shelling out because they're not going to be able to sell tickets. They're not going to be able to effectively merchandise or market these Olympics. They're going to be eating a bullet train worth of money. And you're not going to have Woody Harrelson, Jennifer Lopez, and Wesley Snipes there to help save the day. And then you have the U.S. men's basketball team that will now feature JaVale McGee. And when you think of the all-stars, the luminaries that have played U.S. Olympic basketball. And this is not a slight on JaVale McGee. He is a high-level athlete. But when you see that how tired, how drained, how eviscerated the upper echelon of the NBA is heading into the Summer Olympics, to where JaVale McGee will have to be put into the 12-man roster for the United States Olympic basketball team, you gotta sit there and say, what the fuck? Honestly, what the fuck is going on? In the world of the NBA, where we forced them in the quickest turnaround in modern American sports history. From the end of the season, from the game of the NBA Finals where we crowned a champion to opening night, was the quickest turnaround in sports history. To now, the U.S. Olympic basketball team, something that's a matter of pride, something that people in this country give a damn about, has been decimated and devastated. Like, I think Devin Booker's still on the U.S. basketball team, and he's in the middle of the goddamn NBA Finals. I'm just baffled, bumfuzzled, confused, all of the words, all of the phrases. It's insane to me. As insane as Tom Brady playing an entire NFL season, postseason, and the Super Bowl with a torn MCL. I'll call it right here, right now. I think the Tampa Bay Bucks are going to win the Super Bowl next year. In February of 2022, the Tampa Bay Bucks are probably going to win the Super Bowl again, because if he was able to do that on a torn MCL, what can he do fully healthy? And he's going to play until his 60s. He's going to make George Blanda look like a jabroni. But we're going to take a break. And by a break, you're just going to see a transition. Take a break from me and listen to my good friend, mentor, and all-around smart human, Dr. Marvin Williams.
Hello, family. Thank you for watching this week's episode of Yelling. And thank you for taking the time to check out this week's episode of The List, presented by me, Marvin Williams. You can find me on Twitter at The Side Notes. And again, looking forward for any topics you might want to hear about, or anything you have to say about a topic that I've chosen and the way I've chosen it and what's going on. If you want to hear more insight into my process, just let me know. I don't mind sharing at all. This week, we're going to talk about the new name, image, and likeness deal that's being pushed around by the NCAA, and how much of a garbage fire that's going to be because of, well, the NCAA, I think that's actually the acronym for garbage fire, is NCAA. And I say that because of the lack of leadership. The fact that you would leave something up to each state and each institution to govern themselves, and what are you there for? Or to quote my girl from the commercial, what does the dishwasher do? So that being said, what's kind of the point of your role in the process of determining whether or not a kid going to school on scholarship should get paid or not, if you're going to just leave it up to everyone else? So that kind of tells us on the outside, you're kicking the can down the road, hoping that it'll stay messed up in court or whatever, that you'll finally get your way, or your ridiculous argument about fans appreciating players who don't get paid more than they appreciate players who do get paid. Have you paid attention to any of the message boards for college football? You are not aware of what's going on, are you? Don't worry, we'll tell you about it when you get older. But the one good thing about that, leaving NCAA aside, is I feel this is going to be a huge boon for the non-revenue sports, and more specifically, something close to my heart, and that is women's college sports. A lot of ladies who are in the sports like volleyball and golf and tennis and other sports like that, who have large Instagram and TikTok and Twitter followings and things like that. Now they can monetize on their following, and they can still be themselves and the way they are, and be appreciated for the great athletes they are, as well as having the social media presence that they have. And I think that's going to be great. And for them, they won't be as limited as perhaps some other people who, people tend to focus on like football, because that's what we tend to do in the United States, right? It's like American football is the only sport, and everything else is like in the shadows, and that's okay. But, that's going to be what it's going to be. Whether cats are legitimately getting paid or not legitimately getting paid, that's always going to happen. And that's something that we can debate and go back and forth and whatever. But the idea of the other sports that we tend to not pay attention to until it's time for national championship season, or it's time for some commissioner's cup or something like that, those, or the Olympics, right? Those particular sports now will have a new life and a new home in the avenues that are available to them specifically on social media and other places like that. You look at how when you look at college athletes and you look at their social media presence, and you have the few guys who have mega large followings, and then the rest of them are like, kind of drifting around, a little above mediocrity in terms of where they place. But then you look at the women athletes, even in the non-revenue and non-attention sports, huge media presence, because they're not just representing the sports, they're representing, their family, their friends, other people that can relate to them as sort of not being paid attention to by the mainstream media. And that is great, because now it will give them a chance to feed and take care of the things that they need to, and do the things that they need to do while they are supporting themselves as they go through college. We all see that women athletes, more so than not, tend to finish their careers with a college degree and able to move on to, some who are lucky enough to move on to some sort of professional venue. Well, now guess what? They'll get a hands up, so to speak, as they do that process, right? Be able to monetize themselves in college in a positive way. And there's more positive imagery coming out of that. That means more young women want to be involved in sports, and probably even more young men too, that might not necessarily say, well, you know what? I don't play football, but I play golf. I can go for it now and not feel like I'm the other guy. So that's nothing but good things can come out of that particular side of it, regardless of the NCAA being in the way or not being in the way. So just, guys, just sit down. We'll explain more things to you later. One day you'll figure it out. So hopefully all is well. Thank you for checking it out. Thank you for listening. Again, Marvin Williams at the Side Notes on Twitter. Thank you for checking out this week's episode of Twitter and of Yelling. There we go. And remember, never let Jason Bourne borrow your car.
1 week after our premiere, some people, far fewer people than I'd hoped for, but some people have been asking a very simple and legitimate question. What is yelling? I appreciate your simple question. I wish I had a simple answer. Real talk, to quote Common, opportunity knocked, but he ain't called for a can. I knew I'd get to be a producer on a show 6 weeks before Bobby Bonilla Day. We had a name for it about a month in advance. I knew how I wanted all the graphics to look about 2 weeks prior, and I had my first segment plotted and figured out 3 days before we went on the air. I've been producing stuff for a while, so doing things like this makes me really uncomfortable. Telling you all of this makes me really uncomfortable. But also, technically, our boss is an honest-to-God hand puppet, so this is all very weird, new, and uncomfortable territory for me. Long story short, I don't know who this show is for. I don't know what this show is. All I can tell you is who this show isn't for. For example, if you think NBA super teams are ruining basketball, but you listen to supergroups and music all the time, and you don't see an inconsistency with that, just go away. If you think that tuition for non-transferable college credits is adequate pay for NCAA athletes, I don't know why you're still here after last week, but you probably don't belong. If you think that NBA defenses were tougher in the last 20 years of the 20th century versus the first 20 years of the 21st century, I can either tell you all about the illegal defense rules of the 80s and 90s, or I can just tell you that you're not going to have a good time here. If you don't think that the random-ass nature of interim title bouts in the UFC doesn't delegitimize their entire operation, there are plenty of other YouTube channels, media properties, blogs, and TV shows that you could be engaging with rather than this one, but I'm not allowed to mention any of them. If you're a man with lots of opinions on women's sports, but you don't watch women's sports, delete your socials. Then stop watching. If any of those opinions on women's sports are related to trans women and you believe that you're trying to protect the integrity of women's sports, retire from the internet. Actually, speaking of competition, if you think Team USA's best hope at 100-meter gold in the 21st century deserves to sit out the entire Olympics, but Trevor Bauer should ever so much as look at a clear sunny day as a free man, let alone touch a baseball, we don't want you here. Actually, let me double down on the Olympics thing real quick. If you only started caring about water rules and Olympic integrity with Sha'Carri Richardson, but you never questioned why Russian athletes are still competing despite a deliberate cheating conspiracy by their entire national sports infrastructure, click off this video and finish your getter registration. Listen, I get it. This all sounds defensive. Let me put your mind at ease. It is defensive. We're defensive about sports here. I, personally, am defensive about enjoying sports, and I'm defensive specifically against sports media. Why? Because sports media is an industry that, behind the scenes, believes you will watch more if you enjoy the talking head product less. It's an environment built on the foundation of people who can't bench the bar, criticizing athletes who dedicated their entire existences to their crafts since they were prepubescent. Sports media is an ecosystem wherein the daughter-in-law of Mike Nichols and Diane Sawyer somehow felt comfortable enough to call Maria Taylor a diversity pick while laughing with LeBron's spokesman about Black Lives Matter exhaustion. Because a woman who already has her own television show can't share airtime. A television show, by the way, that has questioned whether or not various players were good teammates at least once per month on average for the last 3 seasons. It's an ecosystem where ESPN won't even suspend Rachel Nichols from the air for bitching about losing a few molecules of her privilege. Because that's the sports media ecosystem. Some people get to run it, the rest of us just get to run around in it. But not here. Not yelling. At least, not until the puppet fires me.
Thank you, Dr. Download, for making me seem the less voracious of the two when it comes to talking to the audience. I've taken a breath. I have not had water, because it is off screen. But it's time for one more word here on yelling, and you can see I'm on a different set today. I'm actually in front of my bookshelf and in front of things like It Never Ends by Tom Sharpling, which is my, choice for the month for things you should read. This is definitely a book that speaks a lot to me and my tastes and basically everything about me as a person. Tom Sharpling's a huge influence on me and a huge influence on this show, but I want to talk about the fact that it's my birthday. Today, I turned 32 years old, and not a lot of people say their actual age on programming, but you know what? We're in the early days of this show. It's deep enough in the archive by the time we get famous, so I'll just say it. And I'm wearing a t-shirt of my friend Michael Kingston's comic book, Headlocked. I'm not wearing a shirt with buttons today because it's my birthday, and fuck you. I'm kidding, by the way, but I've been thinking, and if you saw the essay we posted on the Yelling YouTube channel on worldwideleadersports.com, been thinking a lot about mortality lately, and, on your birthday, you think about the past, and you think about the present, and you think about the future, and my brain keeps going back to my best friend. I met my best friend, Rich Alamia, on on a train when I was in the 7th grade. I was in summer school because I was stupid. And he was in a summer program, and we just met for like a few seconds, and we took the train from 62nd Street in Brooklyn to where I lived in Sunset Park, and come to find out Rich lived right up the street from me. We see each other once or twice, but then in 2004-ish? No, 2003, we reconnect, like a year later. And we just start hanging out. Like, his group of friends and my group of friends just kind of merged like a super team. And from there, nearly every day of my life for 14 years? No, it was about 10 years. 10 years of my life, every day, Rich Alamia was in my life. Football, baseball, basketball, all of the sports, we informed our opinions arguing with each other. Hot Takes would have been the perfect game show for me and Rich to kind of just talk about our opinions on sports and talk about the things that we, his love of Ed Reed, my love of the Giants. I remember watching The Decision with Rich sitting on his stoop on his brownstone with our buddy Tariq, who's now a basketball coach in Brooklyn at a high school. And you think about all of those moments. You remember watching playoff games together. You remember all of those little things, and you remember the conversations and the things you loved about that. And sports has been an indelible part of our friendship, because we play football together. We were on a NYC social team together back when I was in allegedly shape, and he was my best friend. And 8 years ago, I was covering hockey for the Federal Hockey League. And he texted me, "Do you want to hang out?" And I told him I was in Syracuse. And that was the last time I ever spoke to him. He would then have a bike accident, fall into a coma, and then a few days later, he would pass away at the age of 23. He turned 23. Just graduated college, had his whole life ahead of him. Brilliant human being, a good friend, and someone who was going to do an insane amount of good in this world. And I think about him today because he would have been so good on this show. He would have been a cornerstone of Hot Takes. He would have been someone who could have been an indelible part of what we do, an indelible part of my career as a broadcaster and just my life. So him and I right there. One of the last times we hung out, I think it was like 2012 or something like that. We were at a bar, and I miss my friend. And on my birthday, I think of my friends that are gone, members of my family who are gone, and I think about all the opportunities missed and all of the opportunities that lie ahead. Sports is a zero-sum game. You win and you lose. And in between there's a process. And I was talking with Dr. Download about this, just not about this, but talking about process. And he said, if you don't love the process anymore, you should leave. You should leave that thing and find something that you enjoy making or enjoy doing. And it's not about wins and losses, and it's not about that. And it's hard when you work in sports. You're conditioned for wins and losses and all of these things, and then you take a step back and you realize it's about everything in between. And I'm not there yet. But I'm getting there. Rich's catchphrase was live the dream. He's living the dream. Maddie, I'm living the dream. And in a way, I am. For myself, for him, for everybody I care about, I'm living my dream. And just wish he was here to see it. I wish he was here to text me and call me a pussy for being so sentimental and emotional. I'm not crying, but I'm very grateful that Richard Colon Alamia was in my life. I am very grateful for the things I learned being his friend. And I am very grateful that I have the platform to say thank you to my best friend on my birthday. We'll be back hopefully next week with a brand new episode. Until then, I'm Matt Ryan. This has been Yelling.